accounts mapped as primary cost elements. Why you need internal orders? For one, cost elements, which is your GL accounts mapped as primary cost elements. That's what I'm meaning here by cost elements here, alone cannot track necessary data. Now, for example, you might have a GL expense account called advertising costs, and you are creating that as a primary cost element with cost element category 1 for expenses, and you create that advertising cost GL account as a cost element. Now you might be having different type of marketing campaigns. For example, you might have a marketing campaign for your whole company as an advertising promotion activity on TV, on radio, and other types of media. You might have a marketing campaign just for your particular product of your company. For product A, you might be just advertising on TV and other social media. So you might have different other type of advertising, not only for your company, but a combination of a product from your company and another sister company's product. So this kind of analysis to see how much you are spending on these marketing and promotions, you cannot just by looking at the advertising cost find for each individual one how much you are spending, because advertising cost expense account will be common for all the type of marketing and promotional expenses. So you need some kind of an object to track specifically for this particular type of campaign how much the costs have incurred. Now, of course, in the system you can always go and double click on the advertising cost and see the detailed line items and track through that. But imagine over a year with so many different type of line items, it's very tedious, and also there will be multiple line items for the same type of item, same type of campaign. So it's difficult to group those items as well. So you have internal orders which SAP has provided, and you create those individual marketing campaigns as internal orders. At the time of posting your advertising expenses, you specify for which campaign you're posting this for. Then through internal order reporting, you can see at the end of the year how much you have spent for this particular type of campaign. You can even see it by period wise also. So that's why I mentioned here, cost elements alone cannot track the necessary data. You need another object. That's why I call it as why you need internal orders. One reason is cost elements alone cannot track the necessary data. Second reason is cost centers are not detailed enough to analyze more detailed info. So what do I mean by this? Now you have vehicles in your organization and you want to track each vehicle, what is their expenses. Now for one vehicle you will have different type of expenses, starting from insurance, registration, if it has an individual driver, the driver salary, fuel, maintenance, repairs, and so on. A vehicle maintaining a vehicle will have so many different type of costs associated with it. Now we know when you create vehicles, you'll be creating them as assets, and through the assets you will be having depreciation for that vehicle, and in the asset master data you have to mention what cost center it belongs to. So depreciation flow to that particular cost center. Now imagine you have 10 vehicles. Each of those vehicles are managed by the fleet management cost center, or they are all used by some plant maintenance cost center, any type of cost center, let's say. And you are posting all the vehicle expenses to that particular cost center for those 10 vehicles. But for you don't know for each vehicle how much your cost is, unless of course you mention the vehicle ID in the text and then go further drill them. It's once again difficult to trace. So by having an internal order for each of those vehicles, it makes it much easier. You post all the necessary expenses to the cost center, but at the same time you mention the vehicle's internal order also at the time of posting. And because by maintaining that vehicle's internal order at the time of posting, you can track all the expenses posted to that particular vehicle. So again, internal order is, you need internal orders because cost elements and cost centers alone are not enough to analyze more detailed info. Another drawback with cost centers is that you cannot assign a budget amount to cost centers or also cost elements as well. Now what do I mean by a budget amount? For example, in cost center accounting, you have actual line items, which are actual postings. you can put in planned line items. For example, for this particular division, for this year, we are only going to spend $100,000. So you can put a planned value. And you have your variance. So actual minus plan is your variance. We saw this in our cost center reports. However, you cannot put a budget amount. You cannot put for this particular cost center, in this particular year, you can't spend more than $100,000. You can't put an actual budget control for that cost center. Users can still keep on posting as much as they want. It will only have a plan value and actual value, and you can only see a variance. By putting in that plan value, it will not actually control that you cannot post more than this particular amount. Plan value is purely for planning and analysis purpose only. So you need an object which has a budget control linked to it. Now, internal orders facilitates that. For example, you have created a marketing campaign internal order, and you have specified maximum budget amount for this particular internal order for this particular year is $2,000. Now the users start posting expenses. Advertising costs $100, catering fees another $200, and so on. But they cannot exceed the total budget amount of $2,000 which you have specified initially for that internal order. At the moment, they are trying to post some expense amount and it's totaling to more than $2,000. You can display a error message to the user saying that you have exceeded your budget. Please contact your marketing division to increase the budget for the internal order. So you can give messages like that. So there, for internal orders, you actually have a real budget control. You have the PS module, which is the project systems module, to track large and complex project costs. In that you create project codes, and under each project code you have WBS elements, which is your work breakdown structure. And under each of those WBS element, you can track the stages of that particular project and their costs. But that is not applicable for short-term and temporary projects. For example, like these kind of marketing campaigns or promotional activities, it is no point creating a big project code and WBS and all, because it won't be having multiple layers of levels, and it's not a very large project. And usually you create project system to track for asset under construction or something which is going to be assetized or capitalized. So for those kind of short-term temporary ones, you need another cost object. So that's once again, the project systems module also will not suffice for what we are actually aiming for. Then internal order becomes useful as a cost object to track short and temporary projects. When I say short and temporary projects, it's not actually like a project, but more of a activity, like a promotional activity. You can think of something like that, a short-term activity. So because of all these reasons, internal order becomes very useful for an organization. Some examples, we saw vehicles, we saw marketing campaigns and promotions. Another example I have given is telecom towers. So for each area, you will have to put up a telecom tower to give you reception for both your data and mobile services. So when you're actually building a telecom tower, this will be like an asset under construction, and once it's fully completed, it will become like your asset. So in your asset, you track your capital expenses, and then you see your depreciational expenses. However, for each telecom tower or any type of asset, you will have operational expenses associated with it. For a telecom tower, you will be having a lot of operational expenses like maintaining the tower, maintenance costs, rental costs. For example, you might have built it not on your own land but somebody else's land, so you'll have to pay rental costs, insurance fees, many other related replacement of equipments in those costs. So all these different type of costs, you can track operational costs especially. All of this, you can track it via an internal order. So for example, if your telecom company has about 5,000 telecom towers or telecom sites, or you call it satellite towers, and different terminologies are used throughout different countries, you can create each of them as an internal order, and any associated operational costs with them, you can post that particular internal order. So then you will know at the end of the year each of your towers how much they are costing, and operational costs, especially to track the operational cost. And based on that, if you find that one particular area the tower is costing too much, then you can go and analyze why it's costing too much, and you can do the necessary decisions based on that. And this method is applicable for all the other type of internal orders as well. There are two types of internal orders. We briefly discussed this in cost center accounting. One is real orders, two is statistical orders. Let's look at real orders first. So when you create the actual internal order master data, you can specify whether it's going to be real or statistical. You also have the option at the customizing stage, that is at the creating the order type stage, to also default it whether it's going to be real or statistical as well. This can be useful if you are going to have users who are not that experienced in SAP. You want to make it easier for them by not choosing real or statistical, and you want to default it to them, then it's better that you default it at the customization stage, that whether it's going to be real or statistical. So all the user has to do is go and enter the necessary details such as name, description, company code, and so on. Now real orders only can actually collect the costs, that's your expenses, and they can also settle to a receiver. In this example and throughout our presentation, we will be looking at examples of how real orders collecting costs and settle to a cost center. Now why this is useful is, when you are actually going to post, for example, you have created your 10 vehicles as internal orders and you have created them as real internal orders. So at the time of posting, you are going to specify your financial entry, you will specify your expense account, specifying the amount, whether it's going to be debit, and then you're going to specify the cost center objects, your cost objects. So rather than having to specify both the cost center and the internal order, if you create them as a real internal order, and in the real internal order you specify to settle to this particular cost center, then all the user has to enter is the internal order only. So they don't have to go and enter two cost objects, they just have to enter the internal order ID. And end of the month, automatically the amount in this real internal order will go and settle to this particular cost center. We will look at this in more detail later on in our internal order transactions. So this advantage helps the user to enter only one field rather than having to go and enter two fields. At the time of creation for real internal order, you must mention to which company code this belongs to. Of course, you have to mention for the system that this internal order can be used by only this particular company code. So this also helps that if you have multiple company codes in your client, that the users will use the correct internal order for your correct company code. In case they have chosen the wrong internal order and they are trying to process it with a different company code, system will throw out an error saying that this internal order belongs to this particular company code. Let's look at statistical internal orders. Statistical internal orders, as we discussed earlier in our presentation, is purely for statistical purposes, which means just for informational purposes only. So at the time of posting the financial entry, you need to specify at least one cost object. If cost center accounting has been activated, you must at least need to specify one cost object. So it can be either cost center, an internal order, a WBS element, or profitability segment. There are many different types of cost objects that you can specify. In our scope of study, we'll be looking at the main cost objects, internal orders, and cost centers. So you need to specify at least one cost object. If it's a statistical order, and this cost object has to be a real cost object. Now we know cost object, whether it's going to be real or not, is defined by this actual cost object properties itself. So when you want to specify a real cost object, if you specify a statistical internal order only, that will not be sufficient. You need to specify another real cost object. So you'll also have to specify a cost center. So rather than having the user to enter two items, a cost center and an internal order, just like how we did in real internal orders, in statistical internal orders also, you have the option to put in a field saying that assign it to this cost center. Now this is different from settling to a cost center like an real internal order, where actually end of the month you're going to go and actually go and settle to this particular cost center. Whereas in statistical internal order, you're just going to say link it with this cost center. So as soon as the user enters the statistical internal order, automatically the cost center field also gets filled up. It takes from the statistical order master data. Now of course you can leave this blank as well and let the user also go and enter the cost center. For example, sometimes some internal orders might be shared by 2 or 3 different cost centers. So then you cannot actually define a link for one internal order to only go and post to this particular cost center. So the cost center field should be free for the user to go and select. It might be a bit confusing for you to understand how this all works. We'll actually do some postings, and then you'll see the difference between real internal orders and statistical internal orders, and how the actual postings takes place, and their relationship with the cost centers and the cost centers. For the moment now, just look at how the theoretical knowledge of this and understand the basic concepts. Now, unlike real internal orders, statistical internal orders you cannot settle to any other cost objects, like for example cost centers, because it is purely for statistical information only. These do not actually collect costs like real internal orders and go and settle to another object. Also, you can't also do allocation. Now, when you come further down our studies, you'll be looking at allocations, mostly to do with cost center to cost center allocation. All these allocations happen because of our overhead costs. We actually want to allocate to a final products. So in this example, we look at statistical internal orders. Statistical internal orders cannot collect costs because they cannot actually collect the cost. It's like a cost bucket. They can't actually collect the cost. They can't go and settle to another cost object also. They are purely means of tracking for informational purposes only. We saw two different types of internal orders, that is your real internal orders and statistical internal orders. These are actually the properties of internal orders which are activated at the time of postings. Then only it becomes either it's going to be what the real postings and statistical postings are for informational purposes, and at the type of posting only they actually used to identify whether they're going to be real or statistical based on the properties of the internal orders. So they are mostly associated with the other cost objects also, and their properties are related to whether they're going to be settling to another cost object or just for informational purposes and so on. Now, the four different types of orders we are going to discuss over here are actually related with the business scenarios. For different business transactions, this will be defined whether it is going to be an overhead cost order or an investment order and so on. So let's look at these four orders. Just before we start on them, in our whole CEO module syllabus, and for those who are sitting for the CEO certification, the overhead cost orders only is a part of the syllabus. The other three are just for informational purposes only. Nevertheless, in this presentation, we'll briefly look at these three orders, but all our transactions, postings, analysis and reports will be done for the overhead cost orders. These are your general internal orders that we have discussed in our previous examples for vehicles, marketing campaigns and so on. So we have already discussed these order types before, which is usually to capture overhead costs, to settle, or for informational purposes only. We'll be discussing this in more detail later. Let's quickly look at these three types of investment, or three types of orders: the investment orders, accrual orders, orders with revenues. Investment orders typically for investment related purposes. They usually settle to fixed assets. Accrual orders, if you have gone through the FI certification course or FI training materials, you would have come across a section called accrual entries. So you have to be familiar what are actually accruals and accrual entries to understand how accrual orders work. And orders with revenue, these are simply internal orders which can not only pick up costs but also can pick up revenues. Let's look at these three in detail, but we'll have a brief look at them, so you'll have a quick understanding of what these are, because you'll not be coming again to these three order types in our syllabus. Let's look at the properties of investment orders. Just by the word investment itself, it should trigger to you that this is all going to be capitalized expenses, and all these capital expenditures will have to be assetized. And when you look at this assetized, capitalized, all these words, it should trigger to you that this, at the stage of this construction going on, at the stage or the time of the project, is all going to be for a asset under construction, and once the project is completed, it's going to be a final fixed asset. This is the usual path for an investment. Now, investment can also be for assets and also different type of investments. For example, you're going to be investing in a product, and investing in building something, investing in some research, and different type of accounting principles will allow you to capitalize some portion of it and leave the rest as your general operational expenses. In this particular example, we'll be looking at investment orders purely for capitalization purposes. So investment orders related for investment purposes for your company, it's settled to asset under construction. So in the internal order master data, you can specify to which cost object it should be settled to, and you can specify your asset under construction, asset number in that. Mandatory setting for investment orders is an investment profile must be maintained in the asset master data. So in the asset master data, you also have to maintain the investment profile. All non-capital expenditures, that is your operational expenses, are settled to cost centers. So in the same investment order, you have two options, whether you can have actual capital expenses settled to assets and your operational expenses settled to cost centers. Now how to track these? You can either define a percentage method. That's a bit more easier than creating two separate internal orders. You can create, of course, two separate internal orders, one for operational expenses, one for investment expenses, but you can also specify a percentage. Maybe 60% of the cost settled to this particular asset and 40% of the cost settled to this particular cost center. And of course, capital expenditures are settled to an asset under construction type of asset, which has zero depreciation till it becomes a fixed asset, then only the depreciation starts to work. These are some of the properties of investment orders. The accrual principle, we discussed this in more detail in the FI certification course or in the FI training course, and you would have seen that accruals, you have two types. One is your accrual postings and your deferral postings. And usually accruals are for like prepaid or any other type of postings, which also deferrals is more for prepaid, and accrual postings are more for that you have not actually entered anything in your financial system, but you will be entering something later onwards. For example, you might get your electricity bill every quarter. So bill actually comes after 3 months, but you have actually used your electricity utility, your electricity for the first 3 months. You're going to get the bill in the 4th month. However, you need to enter some values in the system to proportionally reflect that for each month you have used some electricity amount. So then you use your accrual entries for that and reverse it at the end of the 4th month when you get your actual bill. So this is actually a quick recap of what we actually do in financial accounting. Now at the same time when you do these postings against those expense accounts, you can specify a accrual order for that. So that in CO side also, on the management accounting side also, it captures those costs. And you can also have different methodologies of allocating costs also. Now in financial accounting, you might have an insurance premium you have paid up for 1 whole year, and you might divide it equally towards 12 months. In management accounting, you can decide, I don't want to divide equally 12 months. I'll probably divide equally for the first 3 months and a different method for the next 9 months. So that's up to you totally in management accounting how you want to do. But the initial cost bucket to collect those costs, you can create an accrual order for that. And there are two methods how you want to do it. One is a percentage method and another method is a target is equal to actual method. So percentage method is mostly just like giving a percentage that okay, throughout the 12 months I'm going to equally divide it by 100% divided by 12%, come to somewhere around 8 point something and divide it equally like that. Or you can say, no, first month post 20%, next month post 10%, and next month post 5%, and so on. You can put your own percentage method. Target is equal to actual method is, here you can define that for this particular period, you specify this is my target amount. And when you actually get your actual amount also, you can specify now this target amount should actually equal the actual amount. It's a different type of methods used for accrual orders. Once again, these are not important for your syllabus, so we'll not be actually doing any transactions or doing any postings, and we'll not be further looking at these type of orders. The other different type of orders is orders with revenues. This at sometimes companies might use it, even though it's a very rare scenario. This is to capture revenue which is not part of your core business. For example, if you are in the business of selling laptops and a company asks you to give you some advice on actually what type of hardware to purchase for their company, and you're doing something like a consultancy service, which is a one-off thing or which is a rare thing and not part of your core business, then you don't have to create sales orders just for that particular one. You can create an internal order with revenues. So when you create the internal order master data, in the order type setting, you have to enable revenue allowed. That means revenue postings allowed in the order type. If you allow that, you can create this internal order to act as something like a sales order. So usually when you actually sell something, you'll be selling it via a sales order. But these kind of one-off costs, or which are not part of your core business activities, you can create them under an internal order with revenue postings allowed. So you can track revenue using these internal orders. Once again, these are not very commonly used, a very rare scenario that we use revenue postings for internal orders. And only the expenses can be settled to cost centers if you have these orders with the revenue. Because remember, cost centers have revenue postings which are statistical only. It can't have real revenue postings. So you can't settle the revenue portion to your cost centers. You need to settle your revenue portion to your profitability segments or other internal orders with revenues or any other different GL accounts. So that becomes a bit complicated, because if you have these orders with revenues and if they actually incur some expenses, then you have to do two different types of settlements. One, the expenses you can settle to cost centers, and the revenue you need to settle to a different cost object. So it becomes a bit complicated. So that's why these orders are very rarely used. And if you really have to use this kind of a scenario for one-off business tracking purposes, then just pick up revenues only. Don't pick up expenses against these orders, because it becomes much easier to settle to other cost objects. Let's look at configuring the internal orders in the system so we can start creating internal orders. So first, in the SAP IMG menu path, go to Controlling, Internal Orders, and we look at Activate Order Management in Controlling Area. Now when you created the controlling area, we would have probably activated this, but in case we haven't done, we can always go here and activate it. So under the controlling module, you have the different type of elements, subcomponents. We saw cost element briefly, cost center briefly, and now we're going to look at internal orders now. And for each of those, you can go and activate their components separately. So we are going to go and activate order management in controlling area. It might have already been activated, but nevertheless, we'll go and see how to do this setting. The short translation code for this is OKKP. And that brings you to this screen. So let's go and select our controlling area. I think it's Z100 if I'm not mistaken. There it is. My controlling area is here. Just double click on that. And here you can see cross-company controlling. All the information is mentioned over here. That's good. Now here, this is where I need to go and activate components for my controlling area. And let me check order management. That's for my internal orders. That has been active already. So no need to do any changes. I can just go back now. So internal order has been activated. Next step is to create your order master data. So this actually like a config which saying now for every different type of asset, the components, we have their own different classes or types. For example, to create assets, we went and configured assets, we went and configured asset classes. To create cost centers and profit centers, you have to go and define the hierarchy. So like that, for internal orders, it has something called an order type. This order type controls what type of orders you're going to create, and the properties also you define in this order type. The short translation code for these order types is KOT2. Let's execute this order type. Now by default, SAP will give you so many different type of order types. You can create your own ones also, or you can even copy one. Now let's just go and see all the different type of order types in the system. And if you're going to create some order types, start off with the alphabet, because system has already taken up few numbers over here at the beginning. Or you can even decide if you want to start with something with a 1 or 2, is up to you. Whatever makes it easy for you. These are some of the order types in the system. But I'm going to create my own order type. So I'm going to create an internal order type for marketing and promotional activities. So I'm going to copy this. This looks like something which I can copy from the system, because I got the word marketing, or something like exhibitions and so on. I'm going to use this option because I'm going to say that my marketing and promotion activities might reflect similar properties of this particular order type. So I'm going to copy this and click on this option as copy as. Okay, I need to give an ID over here. So I'm going to start with the Z. I'm just going to get Z101, and I'll say internal order marketing campaigns. And so I'll use this as an internal order which can be used for marketing campaigns. And by default, can you see a number range has automatically been assigned? We can go and assign a different number range for this particular order type also. And these are some of the properties. So you can see a settlement profile. By default, system has given a settlement profile. This means to what are the objects it can go and settle to, whether all receivers are allowed, or only cost center allowed, or only production order allowed. So many different type of settlement options are given over here. So I'm just going to keep with the default one, settlement of marketing orders. Planning profile, these are for planning the internal orders. By default, this option is given, so do not make any changes. There's something called the execution profile. This is used for another execution purposes, but we are not going to be worried about this, and it's not part of our syllabus, so I'm just going to delete that. Budget profile, this actually controls how you can assign the budgets. We'll look at in budget later in our presentation. For now, just leave the default. Object class, now you need to mention what type of order it's going to be. I'm going to say it's going to be a overhead cost, because this is my type of order for overhead expenses. You have investment orders. You have something called a production order. This is more towards the PP modules, production planning and production orders related. And you can also have a profitability order where you can use for profitability analysis. But for now, we'll be assigning as a overhead cost order. We do not have any functional area settings, so I'm just going to delete that. And model orders is to copy from some orders. I'm just going to delete that as well. And collective order with goods management or without goods management, I'm just going to leave it as it is, without any goods management. Residence time, so after 3 months, if it's not used, it's going to get, it can get archived, so, or after deletion. So that I'm just going to leave it as it is. CEO partner update, I'm just going to leave it as it is, again semi-active. These are different updates of how you want to update the CEO partners, that is your profit center accounting or other different type of cost objects. Just leave it as semi-active. And all the other posting, just leave it as it is. Integrated planning, if you want to have some integrated planning values and so on. But I'm going to take away revenue postings, because I just want to capture only the expenses. Commitment management, you can just leave it as it is. That is just to see when you're actually raising a purchase order, this could be at the commitment phase or not. When you raise a purchase order, there are no financial entries taking place, but you're actually committing to pay for that particular vendor. So it becomes a commitment type of an expense. It's not an actual expense, it's more of a commitment expense. So just going to leave all these properties as it is. And then you can see over here to release immediately. So as soon as you create the internal order, it will automatically be available for release. There's something called status management, which we'll be discussing later. That is actually, you can actually create the order, then later release it for actual use. But for now, I'm just going to call it as release immediately, just to make it easier. And then just press enter in your keyboard. Saying order status in order management not copied, that's fine, it's information only. And you see now the internal order for marketing campaigns is active, and I need to save this transaction. Press OK to continue in your transport request, and now this order is ready, that you can start creating these orders now in the system. Now let's look at maintaining number ranges for the internal orders. The short transaction code for this is KONK. Now you can either decide whether you want to have the internal orders to have the internal numbering that the system will generate for you, and you can define between this range to this range, generate those numbers automatically. Or you can have external numbering where you can go and define the numbers, or you can define using characters also. Of course, advice is always better to have internal numbering. It just takes that one extra hassle of finding out what's the next number that you need to put, or what type of ID that you need to put. Because you can just give a system generated number, and in the description you can put up to 40 characters of what you want to actually describe this internal order about. So let's just go and quickly check how to maintain number ranges for internal orders. And here it comes to this screen, and you need to look at intervals or groups. Let's quickly look at the groups to see overall what are the groups in the system. And you can see these are all not assigned, so these do not have any assignment, any number assigned to it. And there are some other numbers, other type of orders which have the number range here. You can see this is for external numbering. These are some of the internal numbering. You can see each one has their own numbering. And we'll check our order type, which is Z101. Let's see why it's not coming. Our order should come somewhere we have just created. If it's not appearing, let's just go back and look at intervals. These are all the number range intervals, so that's fine. and maintain groups. So try and search. If it doesn't come, then you probably have to scroll down and see, because sometimes this text might not get picked up. So let me just go and Control F and type a capital Z and see if that works. Z101, because it might be case sensitive. Yes, it was case sensitive because I typed in simple Z, which actually I had to put capital Z. That brings up my internal order over here, and that's over here. I can see it now. And let me see the number range assigned. Marketing, the number range is mentioned over here. At the type of the order master data also, you would have seen the number range was given. Now I can actually change this internal order and I can assign to a different number range. For example, if I want to use the number range 500,000 to 5999, I can click on this particular order, select that order and assign to a different order. So I quickly show you how to do that. So just click on that order type which you want to do and click on assigned element group, and you choose which group you want to assign it to, and you can see the number range also displayed, and click on that relevant group which you want to be assigned, for example this one, and press OK to continue. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave it as it is, leave it in the same marketing category order number range, and just exit the transaction because you've not made any changes. So that's how you assign number ranges to your internal orders. You can decide what type of number range you want. You can even create your own number ranges also. The config for internal orders is very simple. Now that you have set up your order master data and the number range assignment, the next step itself is to go and create the internal orders. So it's quite easy for internal order configuration. So I'm going to open a new session and I'll take you to the SAP menu path of how to create the internal orders: accounting, controlling, internal orders, master data, special functions, order, create. KO01, that's a short translation. You go to create, change is 02 and displays 03. So let's create an internal order for the order type which you just created. So you need to specify for what, under which order type you're going to create the internal order. Just like for assets, when you're actually going to go and create assets, you need to specify which asset class you're going to create under. For internal orders, you need to specify under which order type you're going to create. So I'm going to create under my order type Z101, which I recently created for marketing campaigns. So enter the order type and press enter in your keyboard. System is going to give an internal generated number. That's why the ID field is left grayed out here. And description. So I'm going to do a marketing campaign for social media promotions for my company. So I'm going to say promotion on social media for company Z123. Z123. I think this gives up to about 40 characters, and if it's not enough and you want to put in more notes, you can click on this icon, create long text, and here you can give in more notes as much as you want over here. So I'm just going to go back, and this you can put up to a brief 40 character description. So I'm going to give it a description as promotion on social media for my company Z123. And here by default your company code will be entered over here, or you can also go and enter your company code. So I'm just going to mention Z123 as it is. If you have business area or plant or anything specified, you can mention. The object class is taken from the order property, so that's why you can see by default overhead is coming over here. You can assign to which profit center this belongs to. So you can assign a generic profit center or one particular product profit center. You can also mention what's the responsible cost center. This is all for information purpose only. Who's responsible for this particular promotion? You can give a marketing campaign manager's name. Here you need to specify the user ID of the person responsible. Now you can't just give a generic name over here. You need to specify the user ID. If it's related to any WBS element, the requesting cost center, which cost centers or which department is requesting this from, and so on. All this different type of information you can specify over here. Next, in your control data, you need to specify what currency this order is going to have all the posts related to. Now, of course, I'm just going to specify AUD because that's my home currency. But if you're doing a promotion in a foreign currency, you can specify a foreign country. You can specify that foreign country's currency over here. So later when you run this particular internal order report, you can see in that specific foreign currency itself. So this is one advantage of the CEO module, because different cost objects can have their own different currencies for reporting purposes. Now this is the place where I'm going to select whether it's going to be a statistical order or a real order. So statistical order and real orders we discussed earlier. Statistical order is purely for information purposes only. So I'm going to say this marketing campaign activities which I'm going to track is purely for information purpose only. I'm not going to go and settle this to any particular cost center. So at the time the user is going to enter the financial information, that they will enter the cost center and put my internal order also as well for advertising or any other promotion related expenses. Now I can also specify actual posted cost center over here. So then the user will not have to go and specify the cost center. But for this presentation, I'm just going to leave that blank, because later on we'll be going and doing some transactions with examples of both real and statistical orders. Now if it's a real order, of course, you'll be having period and closing activities. These are more complex ones, so we'll not be discussing that. That's regarding more with the production modules. And the settlement cost element, if it's going to settle to just one receiver, you can put the what's the cost element ID over here, and the cost center and the GL account and so on. We'll also not be looking at this because this is just a statistical internal order, so we'll not be having any settlement rules. If you're going to have a real internal order, we'll be going and clicking on settlement rule and giving the relevant information over there. There's also some general data, the person responsible. You can give more telephone number details. You can give an estimated cost of this particular internal order just for information purposes only, which department is overlooking and so on. And the last tab, investment. This is used for the investment profile of the internal order. This is for the investment order only. You need to specify what's the investment profile of this particular internal order. So these are the necessary information you need to enter. Now I just given the basic information to complete my internal order master data, and I can go ahead and save the transaction. And once an order has been created, you will be getting a message saying order was created with number 400237. That's my ID for that particular internal order generated by the system. You can always go and change or display. So I'm just going to go and display the order, give the ID over there, and you can see all the information coming over here, my order number, description, what type of order type it is, all the other relevant information over here. So that's how you go and configure and create an internal order. Let's look at status management for internal orders. Now every order has its own life cycle. When I mean by life cycle, just saying that you create the internal order, costs are posted to those internal orders. Sometimes it can be settled, or sometimes just for informational purposes. And once the activities are all done for that particular internal order, it's closed. Sometimes an internal order will be ongoing. For example, if it's a vehicle internal order, it won't be closed in a short period. That vehicle you can use it for a number of years, and finally when the vehicle is sold or scrapped off only, it's going to be closed. So anyway, all these type of internal orders will have a creation, expenses getting posted, either settled or not settled, and closed. These are usually its life cycle. Now the status management of the system tells you what stage the order is, and also it can also control the business transactions. Now what are the 4 standard status messages in the system? Created, then of course, okay, you initially create the internal order. Released. Now this one you can automatically release the internal orders as soon as they're created. We saw that in the order master order config, where you can just click on that indicator saying released. Sometimes you just create the internal orders and later release it. So unless it's released, you can't do any postings to that particular internal order. For example, at the beginning of your go live date, you might just want to create all the different type of internal orders which you think might be used in your organization and create them instantaneously. But then you'll be saying order during after 2 months, or this after 3 months, and so on. So then you should not release it immediately, because you only want the user to go and post it after 2 months only. So then after 2 months you go to the internal order and you release it. Once it's released, it's available for postings. So these are some of the options which you have in the system. It's based on the status management types and different 4 standard ones already given by the system. You can even create more if you want. Probably one you can create as create, other ones approved and then released and so on. It's up to you how many you want to use. So another option given by the system is technically complete. This means generally all the settings are done for this internal order. Not only settings, all the postings are actually done for the internal order, and no more postings is going to be happening. This project is over now. That's what it means technically complete. But still you can always release it, untick this off, and again go and post it. Final stage is the closed. So once it's actually done the closed stage, then no more postings can be happened. So that means this project is over, or this vehicle has been sold off. This marketing campaign is actually over, closed, and if you want to have another marketing campaign, you're going to create a new marketing campaign. So that's the status of the closed, means no more postings possible. So these are just generally the 4 statuses given by system. Of course, you can always go and create more. You don't have to exactly memorize all these 3-4 steps, but you just have to know just how the process is going on and what are the type of system statuses that you can use and what is actually used for. Now let's look at the internal order which we have created now and see where these statuses are there. So I'm going to come to the main screen and click on display, the order which we just did now. And under the control data tab only, the statuses are there. You can see here system status, it's released. So now it's available for posting. And you can see allowed transaction under released means you can, what are the allowed transactions under this status. So you can lock the internal order. This means no more postings can be done. This is locked. Complete means that this internal order is technically complete. Released means it's actually revoked the release status. So it's released now. If you use this option BFRZ, it will be revoking the release. That means no postings can happen. Technically complete, one of the status we just saw earlier. That means okay, generally all the settings are done, all the posting have been done, and no more postings possible. So then you call it technically complete. That this project is technically over, but you have not done the final close status yet. But as of now, it's all the settings, all the postings are over for this particular order. And there are many different type of settings available. So you can see over here, some have been created by some other users, some you can go and create it also. Okay. So this is what they mean by the system status. And of course, if you can always go and change the status also by going on to order, change. I'm going to go to this option, go to control, and now here I can decide whether it's going to be revoke the status. So if I do the revoke option, that means you can't do any postings, the release status will be revoked. If I say technically complete, that order is actually all the postings relevantly done, and the next stage is to go and close this order. So these are the options that you can do as a system status. Is mainly just to use for controlling of the users going and posting or not posting to this particular internal order only. Use this option. Of course, you can always go and block this order also. You can go to order and there's some options, edit, lock, and so you set this lock. That means this internal order is locked for any postings also. Now I quickly take you through of creating another internal order. Could do it much faster this time. Mention the order type. You can also mention you want to copy it from another internal order. This time I'm just going to copy it from another internal order. I'm going to go and select the internal order type. I'm going to mention Z101. This one I just created now, 4002237. Mention that and press enter. So you can see all the information is getting copied over here. I'm just going to change this now. So this one I did for my social promotion on social media for my company. Another marketing campaign I'm going to do, advertising on TV for product A. So let's say I have a product called, I have some product. I'm just going to give an example called product A, and I'm going to advertise it on the TV. So I can capture what are the costs I'm going to incur advertising this on TV, and just save. And I've been given a order number was created with this particular ID 400238. Now let's look at creating an internal order group. So just like you have cost element group, cost center group, and you have for internal order you have internal order group. This is used for reporting purposes. So as quickly you can see, rather than entering a range of internal orders or typing them one by one, you can quickly enter your order group ID and see what are the expenses for that particular orders. So to create the internal order group, just go to order group over here and click on create. Short transaction code for this is KOH1. And you can give an ID over here. So I'm going to call this order group MKT01. Just for marketing, campaign and promotions, I'm just going to give a short ID called MKT01. So I'm going to call this marketing campaign orders, something like that. And this is my group ID and my group description. Now to include individual orders over here, I'm going to click on order, that is insert the order over here. You can also have subgroups over here and then put your orders also. Now I'm going to specify my order which I just created. Of course, you can always click on this button and select in the system as well. So you can mention like this, order type Z101. These are the two orders. I'm just going to select that 400237, and next one I can type it in 400238. Or I can always give a range between this number to this number, then any orders you create within that range automatically gets picked up. So for now I have created two internal orders. I'm going to mention those two over here and press enter, and you can see the description of those orders are coming up over here, and save this transaction. Now this order group is at the client level, it's not specific to my controlling area, so other users also can use these order groups. So it's important that if you want to have only for your company code, that you create an order group and give a description that is for your company code as well. So that's much easier for you to understand which order groups are for your company. You can, of course, you can always go and change the order group, or you can display the order group and so on. This will be useful when actually doing reporting for internal orders. We'll be looking at in terms of transactions and reports. At that time, you'll see the benefit of order groups. Now, as part of your assignment, you should know the difference between real and statistical orders. We discussed briefly in the presentation what are real orders, what are statistical orders. One of the main differences, real orders you can go and settle to another cost object. Statistical orders is purely for information purpose only. Real orders can actually capture the real costs, so it's like a cost bucket. So when you mention a real internal order, then the postings to any cost centers will be a statistical posting at the time of entry. Whereas statistical orders, all postings are statistical, then you have to mention a real cost object at the time of entry. Most likely it's going to be a cost. You should know to configure the order types. You can of course copy one of the order types and rename it your own existing one, depending on your needs, whether you want to create order types for marketing campaigns, vehicles, or managing any other type of activities. You can create your different order types. And when you create your order types, you can assign a number range for it. You can either assign an internal number range or an external number range. It's always better to use an internal number range, because system will generate the number for you, and in the description of the internal order you can give the more detailed description of what this is actually used for. So let's start creating some internal orders. I just showed you previously how to use that KO01 transaction code, that is to create the internal orders. Now you know through the SAP menu path also how to access that, and start creating a few internal orders for the order type which you have configured. Also, if you have time, go and create some internal order groups. Short transaction code for this is KOH1, which will be useful at the time of reporting.